St. Lilian's academy was a world of its own, wrapped in ivy-covered walls and endless whispers. Girls in neat uniforms bustled about, studying, giggling in dormitories, and sneaking sweets after curfew. Beneath the surface of tests and traditions, unspoken bonds formed between the girls, bonds that defied labels and sometimes challenged their understanding of themselves. Among the students were two best friends, Amelia and Nora, inseparable since they had stepped into the gates of St. Lilian's 3 years prior. Amelia was headstrong, with fiery eyes that spoke even when she didn't. Nora was quieter, content to let her friend's energy shine while she listened to the world. They spent evenings in the school gardens, sharing dreams about their futures, secrets about their fears, and laughter that felt endless. But as time passed, the space between them began to shift. Nora started to notice the small things, how her heart fluttered when Amelia touched her hand, or how she memorized the sound of her voice without realizing it. She told herself it was friendship, nothing more. After all, no one ever talked about love at St. Lilian's. Not this kind of love. One night, after the lights were dimmed and the dormitories quiet, Amelia whispered, "Can I tell you something?" Nora turned toward her, their beds close enough for hushed secrets. "I think I might feel different about you." "About us," Amelia said, her voice trembling. Nora's heart stopped for a moment. She could see Amelia's face in the faint glow of the moonlight through the windows, uncertain, vulnerable. "Different?" "Like more than friends," Amelia admitted softly. "I don't even know what it means. It scares me." Nora reached for Amelia's hand, holding it tight. "Me too." They stayed silent for what felt like forever. The world outside carried on, but for them, nothing mattered except the truth between them. The girls didn't have words for it, not yet. But in that moment, they understood each other. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. They moved through school like before, studying, attending chapel, and joining the other girls for games in the fields, but everything felt charged. They would brush hands and exchange fleeting looks, unsure how to express what they felt when the world around them had no name for it. Rumors swirled at St. Lilian's, as they often did in close quarters. Whispers of close friendships or secret affections echoed between the girls, but no one dared to speak them aloud. Amelia and Nora had each other, though, and that was enough. One day, as their final year approached, they sat under their favorite tree in the garden. "Do you think we're wrong?" Nora asked suddenly, her voice heavy. "Wrong?" Amelia repeated, frowning. "For feeling this way. For being us." Amelia smiled gently, brushing a leaf from Nora's hair. "How can it be wrong if it feels like home?" Tears welled in Nora's eyes. For so long, she'd been afraid of what the world might say. But with Amelia beside her, she felt brave. The story of Amelia and Nora wasn't about rebellion or defiance. It was about two girls discovering a kind of love they had no guide for, a love that grew quietly in the shadows of walls built to keep it hidden. They learned to hold space for each other, to find safety in their connection, and to believe that what they shared was just as real as any love spoken of in fairy tales. When graduation came, they hugged tightly under the same tree where they had discovered the truth of themselves. "No matter where we go," Amelia whispered, "I'll always remember this." Nora smiled, squeezing her hand. "Me too." As they left St. Lilian's, they carried their story with them, a story of love and courage, of understanding and hope. It was a love that dared to exist even when the world didn't yet know how to see it. When Amelia and Nora first started university, the separation was both a test and a revelation. Without the structured environment of St. Lilian's Academy to keep them tethered, they were forced to understand what their bond truly meant. The constant physical presence of their school years was replaced by late-night phone calls, carefully worded texts, and longing that sometimes felt unbearable. At first, they avoided speaking too openly about the depth of their feelings, afraid of what it might mean. But during Amelia's first visit to Nora's university in Lagos, the lines they had danced around for so long began to blur. Nora's small off-campus room was filled with the smell of paint and faint music playing in the background. She had spent days cleaning, nervous and excited about Amelia's visit. When Amelia finally arrived, with her bright smile and city confidence, the years apart seemed to melt away. That evening, they sat on the floor, drinking cups of tea while Amelia shared stories of her classes and her growing passion for writing. Nora listened intently, her head resting against the wall as she watched Amelia's hands move expressively. "Do you remember the tree at St. Lilian's?" Amelia asked suddenly. Nora smiled. "How could I forget? I think I knew back then," Amelia said quietly, her eyes locking onto Nora's. "Knew what?" "That I loved you." Nora's heart skipped. It was the first time either of them had spoken the word, love, out loud. She felt the world pause around her, the weight of their silence filled with meaning. Nora reached for Amelia's hand, their fingers intertwining. It wasn't rushed, and it wasn't spoken, it was understood. The intimacy they shared that night was tender and hesitant, as if both of them were afraid of breaking something fragile. They kissed for the first time, soft, slow, and filled with years of longing that neither of them had dared admit before. It was a kiss that tasted like safety and discovery all at once. As they sat there, holding each other, the room seemed to breathe with them, as if affirming that this was where they belonged. Over the months, Amelia and Nora explored their love quietly. University campuses were different from St. Lilian's, yet they still carried their own shadows of judgment. Amelia, ever fearless, pushed to be open about their relationship in small ways, holding hands during late walks through campus, or brushing Nora's hair behind her ear when no one was looking. Nora, however, was cautious, always aware of watching eyes and lingering whispers. "It feels like we're hiding again," Nora admitted one day as they sat together in Amelia's room. Amelia turned to her, cupping Nora's face gently. "We're not hiding. We're just protecting something precious." Their relationship grew in layers. They discovered each other's quirks and habits, Amelia's love for old records and Nora's tendency to talk in her sleep. Intimacy for them wasn't just about physical closeness, it was about trust and understanding. They spent nights curled up on Amelia's bed, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams of the future. They learned to argue and make up, to balance love with the pressures of academic life and ambition. Nora often painted Amelia, capturing her in soft hues of blue and gold, always looking both fierce and gentle. Amelia would watch in fascination as Nora's brush moved across the canvas. "Why do you always paint me this way?" Amelia asked one afternoon. "Because this is how I see you," Nora replied softly. Strong, but full of light. In those quiet afternoons, love was in the silence, the unspoken understanding that they were building something sacred between them. One evening, after a long day of classes, Amelia and Nora got caught in a sudden downpour. They ran for shelter under a small bus stop, drenched and laughing. Nora looked at Amelia, her hair sticking to her face, her laughter full and free. Without thinking, Nora pulled Amelia close and kissed her, the rain soaking their clothes but neither of them caring. "You're crazy," Amelia laughed afterward, breathless. "For you," Nora teased. That moment became one they returned to often, the feeling of freedom, of loving without fear or restraint. In their second year, Amelia and Nora took a weekend trip to a quiet beach town. It was the first time they felt they could exist without the eyes of the world around them. They walked barefoot on the sand, the waves crashing softly nearby, their hands intertwined. That night, as they lay together in a small seaside cottage, Amelia whispered, "I don't care where life takes us. I just want us to be together." Nora turned to her, smiling. "Me too." The intimacy they shared that night was deeper than before, not just physical, but emotional. They had stripped away their fears, allowing themselves to fully embrace their love. Their love was not without struggles. They faced moments of doubt, society's expectations, the uncertainty of their futures, and their own insecurities. There were arguments and tears, nights when they wondered if loving each other would always feel like swimming against the current. But Amelia's courage anchored them, and Nora's patience held them steady. They learned to fight for each other, to choose love even when it was hard. "I'm not afraid anymore," Nora admitted one night as they sat on the balcony of Amelia's apartment, watching the city lights. Amelia turned to her, smiling. "Neither am I." By the time they graduated, Amelia and Nora's love had become a foundation. It was no longer something they tiptoed around or questioned, it was a part of them, like breath or heartbeat. They didn't need the world's validation to know it was real. As they stood side by side on graduation day, hands briefly brushing, Amelia whispered, "We made it." Nora smiled, tears in her eyes. Together. In their university years, Amelia and Nora weren't entirely alone. Their circle of friends included classmates, roommates, and project partners, people who observed, questioned, and sometimes misunderstood the closeness between the two women. It started subtly. Friends noticed the way Amelia and Nora gravitated toward each other, how they shared meals in quiet corners of the cafeteria, how Amelia's fingers would sometimes brush Nora's hand absent-mindedly, or how Nora would gaze at Amelia when she laughed. "Are you two, like, together?" a friend named Thomas asked one evening as they studied in the library. Amelia looked up, unfazed. "Why do you ask?" Thomas shrugged. "You just seem different." "Close." Nora's cheeks flushed, but Amelia only smiled and replied, "We're best friends." "Does it matter?" Thomas nodded awkwardly and dropped the subject, but the question hung in the air. Not all of their friends accepted silence as an answer. Over time, Amelia and Nora confided in a few trusted friends. Amelia told Tony, her bold and outspoken journalism classmate, on a late-night walk. "Nora isn't just my best friend. She's my person. I love her." Tony stopped walking and grinned. "Amelia, that's amazing. Why didn't you say so earlier?" Amelia blinked in surprise. "You're not weirded out?" "Why should I be?" "You're happy. That's all that matters," Tony replied. For Nora, telling Kathy, her roommate and closest confidant, was harder. She worried about judgment, afraid Kathy might look at her differently. But when Nora finally admitted it, Kathy took her hands and said softly, "Nora, love is love. You deserve to be happy. I'm proud of you for being brave enough to embrace it." Not everyone understood, but these friends became their safe haven. Amelia and Nora learned that acceptance often came from unexpected places, while judgment sometimes lingered where they least expected. It was a hard lesson, but it made them stronger. As Amelia and Nora approached graduation, the pressure of the real world loomed. The question of what comes next hung over them. "Do you think we'll be okay after this?" Nora asked one night, sitting beside Amelia on the balcony of her apartment. Amelia squeezed her hand. "We've made it this far, haven't we? Love like ours doesn't just disappear." The world outside campus wasn't as forgiving. Navigating their relationship in workplaces, cities, and around family members required resilience. Amelia's parents, for instance, struggled to understand at first. "Why do you always bring Nora around?" her mother once asked, suspicion lacing her tone. Amelia paused, choosing her words carefully. "Because she's the most important person in my life, Mama. I love her." Her mother didn't respond immediately, but over time, seeing Amelia happy softened her heart. Love had a way of breaking down barriers, even if it took years. Nora, on the other hand, faced a mix of silence and pressure from her family, who expected her to eventually marry a man. She never denied who she was, but she also learned to pick her battles. "Does it bother you?" Amelia once asked her after a difficult phone call. Nora shook her head. "No. Because I have you and quote." After university, Amelia and Nora built their lives side by side. Amelia became a respected journalist, unearthing untold stories and giving a voice to marginalized communities. Nora pursued her art career, gaining recognition for her evocative paintings that spoke of love, identity, and courage. They rented a small apartment in a bustling city, barely furnished but full of laughter, warmth, and shared dreams. Their love wasn't about grand gestures, it was about the little things. Mornings spent drinking coffee while Amelia read aloud from the newspaper. Evenings where Nora painted as Amelia tapped away on her laptop nearby, their silence comfortable and full. Nights of cooking meals together, messy and chaotic, only to end up ordering takeout and cuddling on the couch. Their home was filled with reminders of their journey, sketches of Amelia on the wall, photographs of them beneath the tree at St. Lilian's, and Amelia's first published book proudly displayed on the shelf. Years passed, and as their careers flourished, their love deepened. They supported each other through struggles. When Amelia's work overwhelmed her, Nora would take her hand and remind her to breathe. When Nora doubted herself, Amelia would hold her close and say, "You're extraordinary. The world sees it, and so do I." When they traveled, they visited places where they could be free to exist openly, cafes by the sea, quiet art towns, and cities that welcomed love in all its forms. Amelia eventually wrote a second book, this one a fictionalized story of their lives, titled Bonds Beyond Walls. At the book launch, Nora stood at the back of the room, tears in her eyes as Amelia spoke to the crowd. This story is about courage, about finding love when the world tells you it doesn't exist. It's about knowing that love, in all its forms, is worth fighting for. After the applause faded, Amelia found Nora waiting for her. They embraced, the years of struggle and triumph culminating in that quiet moment. "I'm so proud of us," Nora whispered. "Me too," Amelia replied. Decades later, Amelia and Nora returned to St. Lilian's Academy for a reunion. The ivy-covered walls still stood, but the whispers they once feared were now replaced with acceptance. Students held hands freely, their laughter echoing through the halls. They sat beneath their old tree, now surrounded by flowers. A young student approached them, holding Amelia's book. "Is it true you fell in love here?" she asked shyly. Amelia smiled, glancing at Nora. "Yes. And we never stopped." The girl beamed, inspired. As she walked away, Amelia and Nora leaned against each other, the weight of years resting gently on their shoulders. Their love had grown from whispered secrets into a story that paved the way for others, a love that had endured, thrived, and become a beacon of hope. Together, they had built a life, a legacy, and a love that truly knew no walls.